When Duty Meets Heart, the Captain and the Healer. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our newest cinematic stories about love, redemption, and the choices that test the human heart. It is completely free, and it helps us continue to bring you powerful tales where duty meets emotion, and where one unexpected decision can change everything. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and tell us what love and courage mean to you. Because today's story will remind you that sometimes the most extraordinary relationships begin as nothing more than an agreement on paper. Now, let us return to our main character. The late summer sun stretched across the Naval Research Base in San Diego, turning the concrete runways into glowing lines of gold. The air shimmered with heat and the distant hum of engines. Captain Ethan Cole stood by a row of medical drones, their metallic shells reflecting the light like armor. His posture was flawless, shoulders squared, eyes sharp, every inch the disciplined officer. Yet behind that composure was a quiet fatigue that no uniform could hide. He had built machines that could save lives, but the same technology had once taken one. Logic had replaced faith, and work had become his only refuge. Across the airfield, Dr. Avery Lane stepped out of the operations tent. Her white lab coat snapped in the wind. She was a neuroscientist, specializing in trauma recovery, a woman who once played cello on stage before trading her bow for brainwave monitors. People called her brilliant, but behind her calm expression lived a storm of ideals and unfinished dreams. Ethan turned as she approached, sunlight flashing across the silver badge on his chest. He held a folder in his hand, stamped with a red seal that read Defense Partnership Authorization. "Dr. Lane," he said, his voice steady but cold. "I am told that without a legal proxy, you will lose clearance to access the neural rescue system." She frowned, wiping sweat from her forehead. "A proxy? You mean a spouse?" "Exactly," he replied. "The department changed the regulations. Civilian specialists must be partnered with an official defense officer to continue classified fieldwork. I am offering a solution." "A solution?" she asked, crossing her arms. "You are proposing marriage, Captain?" His gaze did not waver. "A legal arrangement. 90 days. No romance, no expectations, just signatures and results." For a moment, the world went still. The sound of gulls, the echo of waves, the pulse of heat between them. Avery laughed quietly, half in disbelief. "You really treat marriage like another military operation, do you not?" "Everything I do is an operation," he said. She looked at him, an officer made of iron and silence, and saw, for just a second, the loneliness behind the discipline. Then she took the pen from his hand. "Fine, but I will not wear a ring." Ethan opened a small case and revealed a silver band engraved with a thin line of code. "It is not jewelry," he said. "It is a data key. It will unlock access to our shared research hub." Avery studied the ring, then slipped it onto her finger. The cool metal pressed against her skin, and something in her chest shifted, almost imperceptibly. They stood together on the deck as the sun sank lower, painting the water in crimson and bronze. A drone lifted off beside them, slicing through the sky with a sound like a heartbeat. For now, they were partners by law, not love two people bound by necessity, not by fate. Yet as the summer wind tangled her hair and brushed across his uniform, something unspoken lingered between them, a quiet pulse neither could explain. And in that single moment, a contract signed for duty began to stir with something dangerously human. That was how it all began under the burning sky of a California summer, where logic met feeling, and two strangers unknowingly stepped into a story that would change both their lives forever. The next morning, the ocean air was heavy with heat and salt. At the Naval Research Base, the sound of machines and waves mixed in a strange rhythm, metal and nature breathing together. Inside the command tent, Captain Ethan Cole reviewed mission logs, while Dr. Avery Lane adjusted a tangle of neural sensors on the table. For a moment, neither spoke. The tension of their agreement still lingered, like static in the air. They had signed papers that made them husband and wife, yet the distance between them felt as wide as the Pacific. Ethan finally broke the silence. "You will need to upload your biometric data into the defense network by noon." Avery did not look up. "I am aware. The system rejected my credentials twice. It must not like civilian fingerprints." He almost smiled, but his tone stayed even. "It does not like anyone's fingerprints. That is the point." She met his eyes briefly, two people who could not be more different. He was structure and silence. She was intuition and color, and yet for reasons neither could explain, they needed each other. Later that day, they stood side by side in the launch bay, preparing for their first joint field test. The rescue drones hovered above the ground, waiting for command. Avery clipped her headset in place, her voice steady. Neural link engaged. Signal stable. Ethan adjusted the control glove on his right hand. Drone 1 ready for deployment. As the machine took off into the blue, a group of officers observed from the balcony. One of them whispered something about the captain's new wife, and Avery felt a flicker of irritation. She did not correct them. Let them believe whatever story made sense. The truth was too complicated for gossip. Hours passed as they monitored data, the drone mapping the rocky coastline and transmitting patient vitals from a mock disaster site. When the exercise ended, the results exceeded every projection. Ethan nodded once, satisfied. "Good work, Dr. Lane." "Thank you, Captain Cole," she replied. Then softer, "I suppose the paperwork marriage did not ruin productivity after all." His lips curved slightly. "Not yet." That evening, the base cafeteria was nearly empty. Avery sat with a tray of untouched food, watching the orange light fade beyond the window. Ethan joined her, still in uniform, his sleeves rolled up. He looked tired but calm. "You did well today," he said. "Better than most rookies who have trained for years." "I am not a rookie," she answered. "I just have something to prove." He leaned back. "To whom?" "To myself. To every person who said I could not make art and science coexist." The air grew quiet again. The low hum of refrigerators filled the space between their words. Avery took a slow breath. "Do you ever regret it, Captain, devoting your life to duty?" He looked down at his hands. "Every day. But regret is easier to live with than chaos." She smiled faintly. "Maybe. But sometimes chaos is where healing begins." For the first time, his gaze softened. There was no command in his eyes now, only something human, uncertain, and almost fragile. Outside, the last rays of daylight touched the drone field where metal glowed like liquid fire. Inside, two people who had signed a contract to protect their mission were beginning to sense another kind of connection, something they had not planned, something they could neither measure nor deny. When Avery stood to leave, she turned back once and said quietly, "Tomorrow, I will run a sound wave calibration test at sunrise. You should be there. It might surprise you." He nodded slowly. "I do not like surprises, Doctor. That is exactly why you should come." As she walked away, Ethan watched her figure disappear into the corridor of light and shadow. Somewhere deep inside him, under layers of discipline and logic, something had started to stir, something that sounded almost like hope. The following morning arrived with the kind of calm that made the world feel suspended between two breaths. A pale sun rose over the Pacific, spilling light through the large glass panels of the research bay. The room was silent except for the low hum of servers and the rhythmic tapping of Dr. Avery Lane's fingertips against a control tablet. She had been there since dawn, running her experiment, the sound wave calibration test she had mentioned the night before. When Captain Ethan Cole walked in, still in his uniform, the air seemed to tighten. He paused by the doorway, taking in the sight of her standing barefoot on the steel floor, headphones pressed to her ears, surrounded by oscillating lines of light from the monitors. "You start early," he said quietly. Without looking up, she replied, "Some frequencies only reveal their patterns at sunrise. The brain reacts differently when the light changes." He stepped closer, watching as she adjusted the frequency on the console. "You really believe sound can heal trauma?" Avery lifted her gaze to him, her voice steady but soft. "Not believe. No. The brain is electrical. Emotion is rhythm. Sometimes, healing is not about medicine. It is about harmony." "Paul." Ethan's eyes lingered on her for a second, longer than he intended. "Harmony," he repeated, almost to himself. "That would be a first around here." She smiled faintly. "Then you might enjoy this." She tapped a key. A low, vibrating tone filled the air, not loud, but deep enough to feel in the bones. The light from the monitors shifted in time with the sound, forming slow, pulsing waves. Ethan's smartwatch flashed as his pulse synchronized with the rhythm. He frowned slightly, half amazed, half unsettled. "You just hacked my heart rate." "No," she said, smiling now. "Your body adjusted to peace for the first time in a while." For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. It was only the hum of sound and the heartbeat of the building around them. Later that afternoon, they sat side by side in the control room, reviewing data. The connection between them had changed, still professional, but less guarded. The air no longer felt like a wall. "Your readings are consistent," Ethan said, scrolling through the results. "Reduced cortisol levels, stabilized oxygen intake. Impressive." I told you harmony, Captain. He nodded, but his expression grew distant. If only harmony worked on people too. Avery turned to him. People are not so different. They just resist being tuned. Before he could respond, a voice came over the intercom. Captain Cole, we need you in the command center. There is a report of seismic activity off the southern coast. Possible emergency drill in 20 minutes. He stood immediately. Understood. He turned to her. Stay here until I call. If it turns into a real rescue, I am coming. That is not part of the agreement, Dr. Lane. She looked straight at him. Neither was saving you from protocol last night, but I did that too. He hesitated, then walked away without another word. That evening, the drill turned out to be a false alarm, but it left the base restless. When Ethan returned to the lab, Avery was still there, sitting on the floor beside the large drone casing, writing notes in a small leather-bound journal. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You do not sleep much, do you? Sleep is for people who are not haunted by ideas, she said, or guilt. He moved closer, crouching down, so that his eyes were level with hers. You are too sharp for your own good. She looked up, meeting his gaze without flinching, and you are too afraid of feeling anything that does not fit inside an order. The words hung between them like a quiet challenge. Ethan did not answer. Instead, he reached for the tablet beside her and replayed the tone from that morning, the same sound that had calmed his pulse. The air filled with its slow, resonant hum. For a long moment they sat there in silence, two stubborn souls listening to the same invisible rhythm, both pretending it was only science. Outside, the summer evening deepened into gold. Inside, something fragile began to take shape, something neither of them dared to name yet, but both could feel, pulsing quietly beneath the logic and the duty that had once kept them apart. By the end of that same week, the summer air around the Naval Research Base had turned heavy with heat and tension. The Neuro-Rescue Project had entered its second phase, and Captain Ethan Cole and Dr. Avery Lane were now inseparable during long hours of data runs and field testing. The cameras in the control room caught glimpses of them walking side by side between hangars, exchanging clipped sentences that somehow carried more weight than small talk ever could. To outsiders, they looked like two professionals forced together by circumstance. But those who paid attention noticed something different, a subtle rhythm, the same kind Avery spoke of when she talked about harmony. That morning, she arrived at the command center holding a new report. The last test produced an anomaly, she said. A pattern inside the neural frequency map. It looks almost like a heartbeat. Ethan scanned the page, his jaw tightening. It could be interference. Or a feedback loop. It is not interference, she said quietly. It appeared when you were piloting the drone manually. You and the system were in sync. He set the folder down. You are saying the machine reacted to me emotionally? She nodded once. Exactly. Your stress levels changed its signal. You are more connected to this technology than you realize. Ethan stared at the glowing screen. For a man built on structure and logic, the thought unsettled him. Machines were supposed to follow orders, not feelings. That is not possible, he said finally. Neither is what I do, Avery answered. And yet it works. Hours later, they stood together in the hangar for another live trial. The midday sun blazed through the open doors, reflecting off the drone's metal skin. Ethan adjusted his gloves while Avery calibrated the neural sensors. Are you sure this is safe? He asked. No, she replied. That is why it is worth doing. Come now. At her signal, the drone lifted off the ground, steady and smooth. Ethan guided it toward the testing zone while Avery monitored the feed. On the screen, the two heart rate graphs, his and the machine's, began to mirror each other again. The base officers watching from above murmured among themselves. One of them leaned toward the others and whispered, maybe his new wife is the secret weapon. Avery heard the comment through the glass but ignored it. She focused instead on the rhythm, adjusting the sound frequency to stabilize the drone's flight. For a brief moment, the system reached perfect balance until a sudden surge of energy cut through the connection. The lights flickered. The drone spun in midair, engines shrieking. Abort control, she shouted. Ethan slammed his hand against the console. Manual override! The machine dropped like a stone, missing the ground by inches before stabilizing again. The room fell silent except for their breathing. What was that? He asked. A resonance overload, she said. It happens when two signals align too closely. Your brain and the system became the same circuit. He exhaled slowly, so my emotions crashed a drone. You could say that, she replied. Congratulations, Captain. You just proved that humanity still matters inside the machine. Lingua. A faint smile broke across her face. and for the first time, Ethan laughed an unguarded sound that surprised them both. Later that evening, when the sun began to fall behind the cliffs, they sat outside on the observation deck. The ocean stretched endlessly, catching the last gold light of day. Avery leaned against the railing, holding a cup of black coffee that had gone cold. "Do you ever stop working?" Ethan asked. "Do you?" she countered. He looked out over the water. "I used to think purpose was everything. But lately I am starting to wonder if purpose without peace is just another kind of war." She turned toward him, her voice gentle. "Then maybe what we are building here is not just a project. Maybe it is a way out of that war." He met her eyes and found no sarcasm there, only quiet conviction. The wind carried the faint sound of waves below, and the world seemed to pause around them. For once, there was no order to follow, no report to sign, no boundary left to enforce. There was only the steady rhythm of the ocean, two heartbeats in sync, and the fragile beginning of something real hiding beneath the uniform calm of their lives. The following afternoon, the base was alive with preparation for the official demonstration of the Neuro Rescue Project. It was the first time the entire system would be presented to military and medical officials. The atmosphere was tense, every movement precise. Captain Ethan Cole oversaw final checks while Dr. Avery Lane reviewed the neural calibration files for the 100th time. Inside the hangar, the rescue drones gleamed under bright white lights. The sound of generators filled the air. Ethan stood by the control station, his uniform immaculate, his face unreadable. Avery joined him, holding a tablet and a clipboard marked with the project seal. "You look ready for a parade," she said. "I am ready for scrutiny," he replied. "There is a difference." She smiled faintly. "Then let us give them something worth scrutinizing." From the observation deck above, officers and analysts gathered, whispering behind their notes. Among them was Colonel Warren, the head of the evaluation team, a man who had never believed that emotion or art had any place in military science. At exactly 1,400 hours, Ethan gave the command, "Begin Simulation 1." The drone engines roared to life. Avery adjusted the neural link, connecting Ethan's biosignal to the control interface. On the large screen, a 3D map of a disaster zone appeared. The mission: deliver emergency supplies to a collapsed building site. Everything went according to plan until a tremor in the power grid sent a spike through the system. The drone wobbled midair. The crowd gasped. "Signal instability," Avery called out. "Frequency breach at channel 9. Ethan's hand tightened around the control glove. "Manual correction. You will lose sync," she warned. "Then stabilize it," he said. "You built the harmony. Use it." Without hesitation, Avery recalibrated the frequency, layering her own neural pattern over his. The system steadied. On the monitor, two pulse lines merged, glowing in unison. The drone corrected its flight and completed the mission. When the simulation ended, the hangar erupted in applause. The data readouts showed zero system loss, perfect recovery time, and an unexpected increase in signal strength during the crisis. Colonel Warren leaned forward, clearly surprised. "What just happened?" he asked. Avery answered, her voice calm. "The system adapted to human emotion. It recognized compassion as a stabilizing variable." The colonel frowned. "That was not in the design." Ethan stood beside her. "No, sir. But maybe it should be." "Lodo." After the presentation, the officials left one by one, their expressions unreadable. When the doors finally closed, silence filled the hangar. Ethan turned toward her, his usual control softened. "You saved the mission," he said quietly. "We saved it," she corrected. "The system only worked because we stopped fighting it." He looked at her for a long moment, the faintest smile touching his lips. "You keep rewriting the rules, Dr. Lane." "Pavo. Rules are only useful until they stop helping people," she said. Outside, the sun had begun to set, turning the sky into bands of amber and rose. They stepped out together onto the deck overlooking the Pacific. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and jet fuel. Avery spoke first. "Do you think they will approve full deployment?" "Eventually," he said. "But that is not what I am thinking about." She glanced at him, curious. "Then what are you thinking about, Captain?" He looked at her with the quiet certainty of someone who had spent years hiding behind logic. "I am thinking that I do not know where the science ends and you begin." For a brief moment, the world fell away, the noise, the uniforms, the expectations. Only the wind remained, lifting her hair, catching the last light of day. Neither of them spoke again because there was nothing left to define. The experiment had worked, the data was clear. And somewhere within the perfect symmetry of signal and heartbeat, Something real had begun to form, something that no one could measure, but both of them could feel. That night, the air above the naval base carried the smell of salt and machine oil. The hangar lights had dimmed, leaving long silver shadows across the floor. Dr. Avery Lane sat alone at her workstation, reviewing the data from the day's demonstration. Every line of code, every signal pulse, replayed in her mind like the rhythm of a heartbeat that would not slow down. The door opened quietly. Captain Ethan Cole stepped in, still wearing his uniform, though his tie hung loose. He paused when he saw her sitting there, her face illuminated by the faint blue light of the monitor. "You should get some rest," he said. "You have been here since dawn." "So have you," she replied, without looking away from the screen. "I am not the only one who cannot turn it off." He came closer, standing behind her chair. The sound of the ocean outside mixed with the soft hum of the computers. "You did something remarkable today," he said quietly. "You turned chaos into order." Avery leaned back slightly, glancing up at him. "No, Captain. We turned fear into focus. That is not the same thing." Ethan smiled faintly. "You always have a better name for everything." She closed the laptop and stood facing him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them carried the weight of too many unsaid things. "I never asked," she said finally. "Why do you stay in this line of work, after what happened with your last mission?" He looked down, his voice low and steady. "Because if I stop, then the mistakes win. I would rather spend my life fixing what broke than pretending it never happened." Avery's expression softened. "Then maybe that is what makes you different. You do not run from ghosts. You lead them." He took a step closer. "And you? What drives you?" "A promise," she said simply. "My father was a combat medic. He used to say healing people was not a profession. It was a responsibility. When he died, I decided to finish what he started. I wanted to find a way to heal what medicine alone could not reach." Her voice trembled slightly, but she held his gaze. The silence that followed was not awkward. It was full, alive, like the pause before a confession. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, the same silver ring engraved with the QR code. "You said you would never wear it," he said. "But today when you connected to the system, you were wearing it." Avery looked at the ring on her finger. The light caught the metal, throwing a soft reflection across the wall. "I forgot to take it off," she said. "No," he said quietly. "You chose not to." She opened her mouth to speak, but stopped. For once, the scientist had no answer. He stepped back, giving her space. "I do not know what this is, Avery," he said, "but it feels real, and I am tired of pretending it is not." The words hung between them, heavier than the ocean air. She took a slow breath, her eyes never leaving his. "You are right," she said softly. "But what happens when duty ends and real life begins?" He looked at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then we find out whether this was ever just duty at all." Outside, thunder rolled over the coast, followed by the steady patter of summer rain. The sound echoed through the hangar like applause from an unseen audience. Avery smiled faintly. "Rain in San Diego," she said. "That has to mean something." Ethan watched her for a long moment. "It means even the desert gets to breathe sometimes." As the rain grew heavier, they stood side by side, neither retreating nor moving forward. The lines between obligation and affection had blurred completely. For the first time since their names appeared together on a government contract, they were no longer captain and doctor. They were simply two people caught between what they owed the world and what they had finally found in each other. The morning after the rain, the air over the base felt clean and new, as if the storm had washed away everything except the truth that now lingered between them. Dr. Avery Lane arrived at the control center early, her lab coat still damp at the edges from the fog rolling in off the Pacific. She had barely set her coffee down when the door opened sharply. Captain Ethan Cole entered, his face unreadable, a sealed folder clutched in his hand. The energy in the room shifted instantly. "We have a problem," he said. Avery straightened. "What kind of problem?" "Internal affairs," he replied. "They are launching an investigation. Someone reported that our marriage contract might be fraudulent." For a moment, she did not react. The words sank slowly, like stones dropping into water. "Who would do that?" she asked. "Colonel Warren," Ethan said flatly. "He claims our relationship compromises the integrity of the project. They are questioning every data log from the demonstration." Avery's chest tightened. "You mean the same data that saved the mission?" "Yes. He believes we manipulated the results to cover a security breach." The silence between them was sharp enough to cut. Ethan dropped the folder onto the desk. Inside were printed emails, call transcripts, and a notice stamped under review by Command Oversight Division. They want to interview us separately this afternoon, he said. Avery ran her hand through her hair, trying to steady her breathing. So that is it. We go from saving lives to defending our signatures. Ethan's jaw tightened. I can handle the accusations. What I will not tolerate is them questioning your integrity. Do not make this about protecting me, she said. We did this together. He met her eyes, his expression hard but aching underneath. Exactly. That is what scares them. By noon, word had spread through the base. People whispered as Avery walked through the corridors. Some nodded in quiet sympathy. Others turned away. She entered the small glass conference room where 2 investigators waited, one military, one civilian. They began with routine questions, but the tone quickly shifted. Dr. Lane, the civilian officer said, records show you and Captain Cole married just days before the project's reauthorization. Would you describe this marriage as one of convenience? Avery kept her voice steady. It began as one. It is now a partnership in every professional sense. The officer leaned forward. Professional only? She hesitated. Yes, she said. Our connection does not affect our work. The lie tasted bitter, but the truth would have destroyed them both. When the session ended, she walked outside to the observation deck. The wind whipped her hair, and for the first time since she arrived at the base, she felt exposed not as a scientist or a soldier, but as a person who had something to lose. Minutes later, Ethan joined her. His interview had gone no better. They are preparing a full suspension, he said quietly. Until the inquiry ends, the project is frozen. Avery stared out at the horizon. The sky was perfectly clear, the water calm mocking the storm inside her. All the work, all the hours, and for what? She murmured. Because someone cannot believe 2 people can care and still stay professional. Ethan took a slow breath. They do not see care. They see risk. She turned toward him, eyes sharp. Then let them see what risk looks like. He frowned. What are you planning? The next rescue test is scheduled for tomorrow. We finish it, publicly, with or without clearance. That is insubordination, he said. It is also proof, she countered. If the system works under real pressure, they cannot deny what we built. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. The disciplined officer inside him battled with the man who now understood what she was fighting for. Finally, he nodded once. Then we do it right. One last test. As the sun began to dip toward the ocean, their reflection shimmered in the glass behind them, 2 figures standing at the edge of defiance and discovery. The world would soon call them reckless, maybe even foolish. But for the first time, both of them knew exactly who they were fighting for, and it was no longer just the mission. The next morning arrived heavy with anticipation. The sky over the base was washed in pale orange, and the air buzzed with quiet energy. Dr. Avery Lane stood at the launch pad, tightening the straps of her field vest. She had not slept, but her mind was clear. Across the tarmac, Captain Ethan Cole briefed a small team of engineers who had agreed to assist despite the project's suspension order. Every action carried risk now, but neither of them cared. They had come too far to stop. Avery approached him, her voice steady. All systems are ready. Neural sync is clean. The drone's secondary link is offline, which means we control everything manually. Ethan glanced at the horizon where the ocean met the haze. Then we make this count. Night. The plan was simple but dangerous. They would perform one last rescue test over the cliff south of the base, far enough to avoid immediate detection. The demonstration would prove that the neuro-rescue system could operate under real emergency conditions. As the team moved equipment into place, the sound of waves and distant aircraft mixed in the humid air. Ethan checked his wrist monitor while Avery powered up the neural interface. Their heart rates appeared side by side on the screen, 2 steady lines moving in rhythm. Ready? He asked. Always, she answered. The drone lifted off the ground, cutting through the wind like a metallic bird. Its camera projected a live feed onto the monitor, a simulated disaster zone marked by red beacons and smoke grenades. Ethan guided the machine through the debris field, his hands firm on the control glove. Avery adjusted the signal frequency, her fingers flying over the console. For several minutes, everything went perfectly. The machine responded faster than it ever had before. Each movement seemed to anticipate Ethan's thought before he acted. Then, without warning, the screen flashed red. Power drop, Avery said sharply. The relay tower just lost connection. Switch to manual override, he ordered. We will lose the telemetry. Do it. She switched channels, rerouting through a backup line. Sparks hissed from one of the control boards. A gust of hot wind swept through the hangar, knocking loose a stack of papers. The drone veered dangerously close to the cliff's edge. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Come on. Stay with me." Avery's voice was calm but urgent. "Your pulse is spiking. You are overloading the neural feed." "I can handle it," he said. "You do not have to." Without hesitation, she placed her hand on the sensor pad, linking her signal directly to his. The system adjusted instantly, merging both of their neural frequencies into one. The drone stabilized, hovering above the smoke like a steady heartbeat. Together they guided it toward the target, releasing the emergency pod and retrieving the test dummy below. The mission timer hit 0, and the drone returned to base without a single error. The hangar erupted in cheers from the small team. Avery exhaled, her shoulders trembling with relief. Ethan turned toward her, sweat streaking down his face. "You just risked your clearance, your license, and your entire career," he said. "So did you," she replied. "That makes us even." But their victory was short-lived. Within minutes, the security alarm blared through the base. Military vehicles pulled into the hangar, lights flashing. Colonel Warren stepped out, his voice cold. "Captain Cole, Dr. Lane, step away from the console. You are under investigation for violation of federal protocol." Avery met his stare. "You saw the results. The system works. You cannot erase that." Warren's tone was sharp. "The issue is not performance. It is insubordination. Both of you have jeopardized national property." Ethan stepped forward. "If saving lives is a violation, then charge me first." The colonel's expression darkened. "Be careful what you volunteer for, Captain." "Kumgar." As the soldiers disconnected the equipment, Avery and Ethan stood side by side. The drone powered down behind them, its metallic body reflecting the morning Sunday. What had started as a contract to protect a project had turned into something much larger, a stand for truth, integrity, and the quiet power of two people who refused to back down. When they were escorted away, Avery looked over her shoulder once more at the silent drone resting in the hangar. "We built something that listens," she whispered. Ethan glanced at her, his voice steady despite the weight pressing down on both of them. "And someday, the world will hear it." The trucks drove off toward the command center, carrying them into uncertainty. The sky above the ocean remained bright, indifferent, and endless, as if waiting to see what kind of courage the next hour would demand. The disciplinary hearing was held 3 days later inside a stark white conference chamber at the command headquarters. The windows were sealed, the fluorescent lights humming softly above the long steel table. Captain Ethan Cole and Dr. Avery Lane sat side by side, their hands folded, their faces calm despite the tension that filled the room. Across from them sat Colonel Warren and the members of the Oversight Committee. The colonel opened the file in front of him and spoke with deliberate precision. "You both stand accused of insubordination, unauthorized field testing, and misuse of federal property. Do you have anything to say in your defense before the board decides your fate?" Ethan looked up, his voice steady. "Yes, sir. We did exactly what this project was created for. We proved that human emotion, empathy, trust, connection can enhance technology rather than compromise it. If that is a crime, then I accept the consequence." Warren frowned. "You risked millions in funding for a theory." Ethan leaned forward. "Not a theory, a result. You saw the data." The colonel turned his attention to Avery. "Dr. Lane, do you agree with his statement?" Avery met his eyes without hesitation. "Completely. The neuro-rescue system worked because it was guided by something more than numbers. You can replicate the code, but you cannot replace what drives it: human compassion." Chumpei. For a moment the room was silent except for the soft hum of the lights. Then, unexpectedly, one of the committee members spoke. "Colonel, I reviewed the telemetry myself. Their readings were stable. The system is viable. The mission saved 3 simulated victims under uncontrolled conditions. I recommend reconsideration." Whispers spread across the table. Warren's expression tightened, but the decision was no longer his alone. After a few tense minutes, the chairwoman of the board announced the verdict. "The investigation finds insufficient evidence of misconduct. The Neuro-Rescue Project will be reinstated under revised supervision. Both Captain Cole and Dr. Lane are cleared of all charges." Avery exhaled, relief washing over her face. Ethan turned slightly toward her, their eyes meeting in quiet disbelief. When they stepped outside, the sun was setting over the Pacific, turning the water into liquid gold. The air smelled of salt and jet fuel, but also of freedom. They walked to the edge of the dock where the last prototype drone sat on standby, its metal surface gleaming softly in the fading light. "We made it through," Avery said. Ethan nodded. Barely. She looked out at the horizon. Do you ever think about what comes next? I used to, he said. Now I try to just stand still and feel what is real. All day. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the same silver ring engraved with the security code. This started as a key, he said quietly. Now it feels like a promise. He handed it to her. Keep it. Not as evidence, but as a reminder. Avery smiled faintly and slipped the ring back onto her finger. Then here is my reminder, she said, placing a folded sheet of paper into his hand. He unfolded it carefully. It was a blueprint for a new facility labeled Neuroharmony Center, San Diego. You are opening a lab, he said. We are, she corrected. A place where technology and empathy meet halfway. The waves crashed softly below them, and the last light of day faded into the ocean. Ethan glanced at her, the quiet strength in her eyes reflecting everything they had fought for. Then I guess duty finally met heart, he said. Avery smiled, her voice barely above the wind. No, Captain, duty became heart. Tum. As the camera drone lifted off beside them, the sound of its rotors blended with the rhythm of the tide. Two figures stood together at the edge of the pier, no longer bound by orders or contracts, but by choice. And somewhere above the vast summer sky, the world felt just a little more alive, a little more human, because of them.